Thank you, Abba Father. Here we are again today, having to look a little bit deeper into our restoration plan and to be able to cover the feast today. Abba, let's just start in prayer. Abba, I just want to come before your throne of grace, and I just want to thank you. Thank you, Abba, for this day. Thank you, Abba. I am so grateful in my spirit for the rain that you brought this weekend, Father. And I just want to thank you that your creation is truly smiling on this little bit of rain that we had. And Abba, I pray that you will open the floodgates and give us even more, Abba, as we truly need the rain to be able to come and wash us from the top of our heads to the soles of our feet. And I just want to thank you, Abba Father, for the gift of your Son, Yahuwah. Thank you, my King. Thank you for Yahuwah. Thank you for the blood of Yahuwah. Thank you that his blood has come to wash us clean, that his blood has come to deliver us. And I just want to thank you for that, Father. Thank you, my King, today as we look into these feasts. Thank you for giving us these feasts, these appointed times, these appointed seasons that you have set apart for your children. Thank you, Father, that my prayer will be that more and more of your people will start wakening up in this hour to understand the significance of these feasts, these appointed times, these rehearsals that we need to do in order to prepare us to be able to dwell with you in the kingdom reign, which is so upon our doorstep already. And I just want to thank you, Father, that you alone be the one to teach us by your Ruach. Will you, Holy Spirit, just come and teach us and lead us and guide us in the ways that we are to be able to go, especially as we read the scriptures, to have the fuller understanding, so that we can really glean on the richness of your word in understanding these feasts. So I just want to praise and thank you for this in Yahushua's name. Amen and amen. Okay. So today we're going to continue with our restoration plan in being able to look at something that for me just came to really just complete the full package. As when we start to look at these feasts and the feasts that the Father has put in place, it really is the completion of the package. Because from creation, he has given us signs. And we need to understand, man has his way, but Abba Father has his way. Man has his days, his feasts, his appointed seasons, his times, but he counts that all as rubbish in the end, because he wants us to follow his ways and his plans and what he's put in place from the beginning. And Father works according to these feasts. And like I always say to people, I say to them, so tell me something. When is Yahuwah coming? And people say, oh no one knows the day, no one knows the hour. Fair enough. No one knows the day, no one knows the hour. But do you know the season? Because at the end of the day, he said clearly, as you see the leaves falling from the trees, you know the season of what we are in. So shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. We are to know the season. So if we don't even know the season of when he's coming, how do we know when to prepare? And so as we start to cover these feasts today, we start to understand that in everything that the Father did was in fulfillment of feasts that he gave, that we will look at, that was appointed times that he gave from the beginning of creation. So we're going to start by looking at Genesis 1, verses 14 to 19. Okay. And Yahuwah said, we're going to read from verses 14. And Yahuwah said, let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens, to separate day from night, and let them be for signs and appointed times and for days and years. So Yahweh seen clearly that he's going to put an expanse in the heavens of lights, and these are going to be able to separate the appointed times and for days and for years. And let them be for light in the expanse of the heavens, to give light on the earth. And it came to be so. And Yahuwah made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And Yahuwah set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And Yahuwah saw that it was good. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, and that was the 4th day. So here we're clearly going to see that he has put the greater expanse of light. What is that? The sun. Then he says the lesser light. What is that? The moon. And then he puts the stars. And these are, let them be for signs and appointed times, for days and for years. So these expanses in the heavens that he's going to put there, the sun, the moon, and the stars, are signs for us. Now, I want to ask you, what was the sign that the wise men saw in the heavens that they knew that Yahuwah had been born? What did they see? It was a star. Amazing, hey? There was a sign in the heaven. And through the sign in the heaven, they knew that there was a king that had been born. Because the expanse of the heavens has been put there as signs for us. That's why we will have the moon cycle. It starts with a new moon, then it goes to full moon, and then it starts again to be able to go less and less and less until eventually it's dark. So the moon gives you a month cycle. The sun gives you a season cycle. And it gives you a day cycle. Because every day, as you know, well, things work opposite. Everything with the Father works opposite. That we will see as it gets light, the sun rises and you see the light. And then when the sun sets, it gets dark. Now, interesting, let's just look at one thing over here that it says in verse 19. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning the 4th day. And when you work through creation, it always starts, day starts. And then it came to be evening, and it came to be morning, and then it was a day. But the day starts in the evening. And as we progress throughout the scriptures, we start to see that a day is actually from evening to evening becomes a day. The way we would understand day. So Father's calendar is quite opposite to everything that we have today. So when we cover these feasts, we're going to understand when Father starts the new year. Not when a Gregorian calendar starts the new year, but when Father starts the new year, when Father starts his day, when he starts everything. Because this is the significance of what we are to cover today. And so if we look and see these feasts, the feasts of Yahuwah are the signs. These feasts are the signs between him and his people. He created the sun, the moons, and the stars for appointed times and feasts. They serve as Yahuwah's timepieces, set in the heavens to allow mankind to be tuned in with the kingdom of Yahuwah and to learn of his will for our lives. So how powerful is that? Imagine that. He puts those stars, sun and moon in the heavens to be signs. They are set in the heavens to allow mankind to be tuned in with the kingdom of Yahuwah and to learn his will for our lives. So he didn't just put them there so that we can have sun in the day, so that we can have the moon in the night. That's why there are times that you'll see like blood moons, like the last 2 years from there was the 14th and the 2014, 2015, we had 2 sets of blood moons. And interesting how those blood moons were all on the times of his feasts. So he was bringing a warning to say, listen, it's not every day you're going to get a blood moon and an eclipse. But these happened at his seasons and his appointed feasts and times. Now, if people were not even looking at that, then how do you know what he's speaking? I mean, understand. He's speaking through the things that are in the heavens. That's how those wise men knew that the Messiah had been born. Because they knew the language of the heavens, of what the Father's put in those heavens. There's constellations that get put in the heavens. Like they say, that the constellation that was in the heavens at exactly the time of when Yahuwah was crucified was a ram, because he became the ultimate sacrifice for us as a ram that was sacrificed. So the constellations speak signs, just as the moon does. I mean, if you were on an island, how would you know a month? By you looking at a moon, you see a moon cycle for a month. And these were the things that he put in the heavens for us. But we have become so technically minded these days, and we are so blasé to what is out there that we don't even acknowledge or appreciate his creation anymore. I mean, we will stop a car just to take a photo of a sunset, because it's like, wow, Abba, so beautiful. And a sunrise, so beautiful. And now when on Saturday night, we were sitting over here and we saw this most beautiful, full moon, that it was like yellow, and it was huge in the heavens, and we thought, wow, this is a super moon. And then you worship the Creator by His creation, because this is what He's created, and we said, wow, this is amazing. And you just are more in awe of who He is by the way He creates things. And that's how we learn to draw closer to Him, not in just, this is the relationship that we have with Him. I mean, all creation worships Him. I mean, I was so, when it was raining on Sunday, I was looking at the little birds. They were outside, and they were chirping away and so excited, and I could see the little wings flapping, and I thought, oh, Father, thank you so much. It's not just the rain for us, but it's the rain for your creation. Because your creation is rejoicing. I said your trees right now, your plants, they're smiling. Why? Because there's a little bit of rain from this heat that we've had, where they just need that little bit of rain. Abba, thank you. Thank you that even if it's just a kiss from you right now from heaven, that's how I see it. You know? Because you tend to become aware of His ways, of the way that He is. And even though there's many judgments that are upon the earth, that He can still be mindful of those who are truly seeking Him, you know, to at least just have mercy in the time of His judgment, especially on His creation. Because shame, all creation groans and waits for the sons of Yahuwah to restore all things back to Him. So this is why we need to be able to come before Him in His seasons and say, Abba, please. Okay, so let's go to Genesis chapter 8, verse 22. So we see, and it says, as long as earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. So we see there that He has put seasons in place. He has put seed time, harvest time, because everything about His feasts has to do with seed time and harvest time. Because we'll soon see that His feasts have to do with harvest and sowing and, you know, giving Him offerings of the fruit of the land. Right. Let's go and look at Daniel chapter 7. We're going to start at the beginning to be able to see where has it gone wrong. Because you know what? At some stage, this was happening. I mean, these were the things that was given already from the time of, you know, Noah, that when he came out of the ark, that the Father would have taught him these things. The Father was teaching His ways to Abraham. And then the Father taught it to Moses. And so it's come down. But somewhere it's got lost. And we are right now in this place of where it's been totally lost. We have a totally different calendar. We have a totally different way. We're not even aware of anything about the Father's calendar. So let's go and see, let's start at the beginning and see where did it go wrong. So we're going to go to Daniel chapter 7, verses 24 to 25. Okay, Daniel chapter 7. And the 10 horns are 10 sovereigns from this reign. They shall rise, and another shall rise after them. And it is different from the first ones. And it humbles 3 sovereigns. And it speaks words against the Most High, and it wears out the set-apart ones, the set-apart ones of the Most High, and it intends to change appointed times and law, and they are given into a hand for a time, times, and half a time. So here we see that there is someone that's going to raise up, that's going to start changing the times and the seasons and the appointed times, and he's going to come up against the anointed ones of the Father. So, right from the beginning, already in the time of Daniel, understand, when they were put into captivity, were they able to now keep the things that they were supposed to keep? They were now in bondage. They were now in slavery. They had been captured. And these were the things that the Father had already given them. And this is talking also of, things that's still to come as well. That how he's going to be able to come against the set-apart ones. So every time you've got to set apart people, there's always a persecution that will come upon them. The minute there's a person that decides to come out of the norm, that they were following with you see, it's like I always say, have you ever checked the sardine run? Have you ever thought of the sardine run? This is how the Father showed it to me once. I saw this in a vision. The sardine run these sardines, boy, it's like this, it's almost like I saw these rivers opening and these fishes are all coming in. But who's waiting for them when they come into the sea? Who's all there? All your barracudas, all your sharks, all your fish, the big fish they're all gonna. So you see, there's these fish, and these fish are swimming downstream, and boy, they're going fast, and they're so excited they're going into the big ocean. Wow, freedom, big ocean. And who's waiting there for them? The enemy, the sharks. You see, that's the broad road. The broad road that in the end you travel on this broad road with everybody else. And there's so many and you think, cool, I'm out. And then right on the other side is going to be this thing sitting waiting for you. That's going to be destruction in the end. But yet he talks about a narrow path. That narrows the road that leads to life, and few find it. And that is why he spoke to me and he said, Natalia, you need to be a little fish that swims upstream against the flow. That's not easy. You know how difficult it is to flow upstream? It's not easy. Imagine this, I saw the vision of it. I was like this little fish trying to swim, and they're bumping me, and you trying to swim upstream. It takes a lot of struggle to do that. But that is what the Father requires. That's why 17 times in the book of Revelation he talks about those who overcome. Because in the end, it's the set-apart ones that will overcome. And they need to overcome the tests and the trials. The tests and the trials need to come for us to be able to overcome. So that's why there's already a time in the time of Daniel when the temple was destroyed, everything, they lost it. That was from there. That already they got a new calendar. That because now they were totally in the dispersion. How the heck are they going to keep their calendar? And this is even when there was a time that even with the sages, they started a Talmudic, it's called the Babylonian Talmud. Because it was in the time of when they were in Babylon that they then wrote a Babylonian Talmud, which is unfortunately a lot of where the Orthodox Jews study this Babylonian Talmud. And this is how they then also calculated their calendar. And their calendar then starts at a different time to what the Father's calendar starts. And so, understand, right now, there's a few calendars running. And even, believe you me when I say to you, when it comes to a calendar, I've had my fair share. Because even right now this year, there are so many of us on different calendars. And we really need grace in this area. So this is where I wanted to show you, where already here, something has happened. Where there's going to be a man that's going to raise up, that's going to change seasons. And this is where the Gregorian calendar, the same concept, When I studied this, I went and checked this up somewhere, that they said that the same Gregorian calendar system was what they took then, the Jews took to be able to calculate the calendar that they got now, that they work on. And so it's a system calendar that we have received, and everything has been perverted, unfortunately. Where we now got New Year starting on the 1st of January, which you're now giving honor to Janus, which is another god, and all these things that go with it. And so we need to get back to the beginning. And when does the Father say his calendar starts? So let's go and look at Exodus chapter 12 so that we can start at the beginning, and we can be able to establish when does the Father say his calendar starts. Because at the end of the day, the only calendar that I want to be on is the calendar that the Father spoke from the beginning, and this is the calendar by which he says we need to be able to walk. So we are going to start, I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 12, 1 to 24, because now we're going to cover Pesach. We're going to start with Pesach. So as we're working through these feasts, I want you to understand these feasts as the tabernacle. So think of Passover, which is the Hebrew word for it is Pesach, and that's Passover as we understand. Definitely it's not Easter, because Easter is giving glory to Ishtar, which is the goddess of fertility. And that's why at Easter time you're going to have little Easter eggs being given and Easter bunnies being given and all of the stuff being given and hot cross buns and all the stuff. Why? Because that is the celebration of the goddess of Ishtar, that was the fertility goddess. So that's why you give little Easter eggs for that fertility. And at the same time, that's why the rabbit, because the rabbit is your most producing a mammal that you get is a rabbit. It produces, like it has babies, the mammal that has the babies the most is a rabbit. And so that's why you give a rabbit, a little Easter bunny. See, it all comes back to that pagan. And this is what we've been doing. But we have not understood. Because when Constantine, you need to understand what happened. From the time of Constantine then came to bring one world order, one world religion. So what the Pope is trying to do now is exactly what Constantine did then already. I mean, Constantine was the very first Pope, actually, that you can say, because it was from there that then you basically got the Catholic Church that was then founded. So you can actually say Constantine was the first Pope, because already with Constantine, he came to change, to bring one world religion, to say, right, we are all going to celebrate the birth of our Messiah, of our gods, on the same day. So whether you serve Jesus, or whether you serve Zeus, or whether you serve Ra, or whether you serve Nimrod, it doesn't matter. All of them's birthday is going to be the 25th of December. So if you celebrate the Messiah's birthday on the 25th of December, you are celebrating his birthday with every other god, because that's what Constantine did. And our Messiah was never born on the 25th of December, because that's the middle of winter. In Israel, they could actually be snowing. There's no way that there's going to be shepherds out in the field at that time. That already is enough for us to know. Then he says, right, Easter, while everybody's celebrating Easter, let us all come together, and now we're not going to be doing Easter, we're not going to be doing Passover or whatever it is. We're all going to come together, we're going to all celebrate Easter. And then our death and resurrection of our Messiah gets put in with a pagan holiday again that has to do with a fertility goddess. So I'm just giving you the foundations here of where these pagan things have come from. Okay, so if we look at Exodus, right, so we're going to start reading from Exodus chapter 12, from verse 1, so that we may understand exactly where we are in terms of when the year will start. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, the new moon is the beginning of the new moons for you. So this new moon is the beginning of new moons for you. It is the first new moon of the year for you. Now I think that's very clear. It's the first new moon of the beginning of the year for you. Speak to all the congregations of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this new moon, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the beings. According to each man's need, you make your count for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now understand, we always see this gentle, meek little lamb. No, it was a year old. So you understand, it was already more like a ram than it was an actual little lamb. It was already a year old. This is another thing that we haven't really understood. They always show a little lamb. It was a year old already. Because it needs to be able to be shown that it's got no spot or wrinkle in it. You see. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. So you see, let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. Then all of the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on the night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its inward parts. And do not leave of it until morning, and what remains of it until morning you are to burn with fire. And this is how you eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Pesach of Yahuwah. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall strike all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment. I am Yahuwah. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood I shall pass over you, and let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Mitzrayim. And this day shall become to you a remembrance, and you shall celebrate it as a festival to Yahuwah throughout your generation. Celebrate it as a festival and everlasting law. Okay, make note of that. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you shall cause leaven to cease from your houses, for whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that being shall be cut off from Israel. And on the first day is set apart, a set apart gathering, and on the 7th day you have a set apart gathering. No work at all is done on them, only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared by you. And you shall guard the festival of Matzot, which is the festival of unleavened bread. For on this same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim, and you shall guard this day throughout your generations as an everlasting law. Okay, so he's saying it for the second time. Let's make a note. In the first month, and on the 14th day of the new moon, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the new moon on the evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your houses, for if anyone eats what is leavened, that same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether sojourner or native of the land. Do not eat that which is leavened. In all your dwellings you are to eat unleavened bread. And Moshe called all the elders of Israel and said to them, Go out and take lambs for yourselves according to your clans, and slay the Pesach. And you shall take a branch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin, and you, none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. And Yahuwah shall pass on to smite the Mitzrites, and shall see the blood on the lintels and on the doorposts, and Yahuwah shall pass over the door and not allow the destroyer to come into your house to smite you. And you shall guard the word as a law for you and for your sons forever. 3rd time. And it shall be when you come to the land which Yahuwah gives you, as he promised, that you shall guard the service. Okay, so there we go. So here we go. So here we're seeing clearly that the Father is speaking, and he's giving us an order here of a Passover. Now, what is beautiful about the Passover, and if truly we are able to sit with Jewish people and explain to them step by step what Yahushua went through, they will understand that this Passover was absolutely fulfilled by Yahushua. It was fulfilled by him. Now, the way that the Father has showed me to be able to teach the feast is I take a menorah. So if you take your menorah, this is how you take, they are 7 feasts. Like there's 7 branches of the menorah. Your first 3 feasts is what's spoken of over here. First one was your Passover. Okay, so what does he tell you to do? He tells you here, on the 10th day, you are to take a lamb. You are to keep the lamb for 4 days for inspection. On the 14th day, you are to inspect the lamb. If the lamb is perfect and there's no spot on it, then that lamb is going to be then the lamb that you are going to slaughter. So let's go back and see what happened with our Messiah. On the 10th day, interesting, if you take a lot of the church, they celebrate, especially the Catholic Church, they celebrate Palm Sunday. What is Palm Sunday? Palm Sunday is exactly when Yahushua, being on the 10th day, that is the day that Yahushua came riding on the donkey and they hailed him as king. So they put out those palms for him, and when he came on his donkey riding through the city, he was declared, he was chosen as the lamb. They hailed him as king, and they chose him as their lamb. But now, 4 days after that was when he went in to appear before Pontius Pilate. And remember, he was inspected. He had inspections that they did. 4 inspections that they did. Pontius Pilate, remember, he washed his hands. I find nothing on him. And he was inspected. Just like the lamb has to be inspected on the 14th day. Once he said, I find nothing on him, washed his hands, he's been inspected, he's been chosen. Then he says to him, you're not the one who crucifies me or whatever. You're not the one who hands me. I willingly give myself. My Father has already ordained this. He was already chosen as the lamb that was having to be slaughtered. He chose. So do you see here, where if you really sit down, now do you know in the land of Israel, at the time of the temple, they would always sacrifice 3 lambs. There would be 3 lambs. There would be one at 9 o'clock, there would be one at 12 o'clock, and there would be one at 3 o'clock. 9 o'clock, Yeshua was condemned. 12 o'clock, he was crucified. 3 o'clock, he died. He fulfilled all 3. And when you understand these feasts, you will understand why it is that now all of a sudden you keep a Friday as being funny. That was the Sabbath. It's okay for it to be the Sabbath then getting down because he died on the Friday. Because that would have been when in the evening they got to take his body down. So they said it was the Sabbath. But if you don't understand the feast, it was not the Sabbath of a Friday. It was a high holy Sabbath. Because the next day it was going to be Pesach. He fulfilled exactly what was being done. At the time of when they were slaughtering their lambs for the Passover meal that night, that was when he had to be taken off the cross, off the stake. Why? Because they were going to have their Passover meal that night. So that is where Yeshua fulfills the very first candle of your menorah, Pesach. And then he sheds his blood. What was the significance of the blood? They had to put the blood on the lentils. Otherwise, if the blood was not there, when the angel of death came, you would die. Because that was when they were going to kill the firstborn. So understand, he becomes the firstborn that dies in place of the firstborn that was supposed to die in Egypt. Yeshua becomes that firstborn. He dies so that we may be spared. So the blood that has been shed is now the blood that he sheds for us on the doorposts of our hearts, so that he comes and delivers us out of Egypt. And that we do not have to be, if we've received Messiah, we have received the salvation that he has given us, where we are now not to have to die. But in him we can live. And so that's what he did with the blood. So when you explain to the Jewish people, they put the blood on the lentils, that's why the blood of Messiah was so important, that all that blood that was shed. Because as that blood was being ripped from his back, and as he was being scorched, that blood was being shed for us. That we need to understand. As he was then at that time, as he was being crucified, that was exactly how the lamb was being slaughtered at that time. So at 12 o'clock, the second lamb. At 3 o'clock when he died, the last lamb. And then Pesach would have begun that evening. And that's why they had to take him off the cross. Because now it was going to be a high holy Sabbath. Which high holy Sabbath? The high holy Sabbath of unleavened bread. Because straight after that, you have the Passover. That evening, as it comes to the time of the day coming to an end. Now, in the Father's calendar, day does not begin at sunrise. Day begins at sunset. So at that time of when it's coming to the afternoon of the day coming to an end, that is when you slaughter your lamb, and then by the evening you sit down to eat your Passover lamb, and then you have unleavened bread. And from that evening of the new day of the 15th has started, because day starts evening. So 14th was the day. That evening starts the 15th. That's your day of unleavened bread. Because day begins at evening. Now, you sit down, then you have your unleavened bread. That's your second feast. These are the spring feasts. Pesach is known as your spring feasts, because this is at the time in the land of when you're going into springtime. Okay, so if we look and we see, as I've explained to you, just from this, we can see that Yeshua, he became the Passover lamb. Then we celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. And then he resurrects on the third day. And as we go into this, you're going to see there's first fruits. So we will cover each one. So let's go and look at Luke 2, verses 41 to 42. Because Yeshua was from a child always at the feasts. So we need to look and see that we need to build a foundation that people can see that the feast was not just something that was being done in the Old Testament, but already in the New Testament it's there. So let's go look at Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, verses 41 to 42. Okay, let's read from verse 40. And the child grew. Who's the child? This child is Yeshua. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, being filled with wisdom, and the favor of Yahuwah was upon him. And his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the festival of the Pesach. Do you see? He was being taken to that feast every year. He was in Jerusalem celebrating that feast. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the practice of the festival. Do you see? So our Messiah, from a little boy, was already being taught. He was already being groomed that this Pesach feast he was going to fulfill. But does it mean that because it's fulfilled, you don't need to keep it anymore? Did we just read that it is for you forever, as for you to be able to keep? Because remember, these feasts they are basically, they're part of the eternal feasts. They're part of, for us to remember. It's part of a remembrance. That's why, as before in the Christian churches, we celebrate Easter. Why do we celebrate Easter? To remember what our King has done for us. And so that is why we will celebrate Pesach. Because for us, we're not celebrating Pesach the way the Jews are celebrating Pesach, because understand, to them the feast that they celebrate is coming out of Egypt. But when we have a further understanding, then we really understand at the same time as what they are celebrating Passover as coming out of Egypt, we also understand our Messiah didn't just come and die for us. Our Messiah came to deliver us out of Egypt so that we don't have to receive the plague that's going to come to take us, the spirit of death. You understand? So that's where the fulfillment of the feast then takes place. And so imagine if we're really able to convey this to the Jews. They will be able to know their Messiah was Yahuwah, because this feast is fulfilled. It is fulfilled. Yeshua fulfilled it. You understand? John chapter 2 verse 13. Let's go look at John chapter 2 verse 13. Because it's like I said, I want us to look and see that these feasts are already being spoken of in the New Testament. So it says, and the Pesach of the Yehudim was near, and Yahushua went up to Jerusalem. So the Passover was near, and Yahushua went up to Jerusalem. So here you see that our Messiah himself is keeping this feast. It's not that he wasn't keeping the feast. No, he was keeping the feast. Let's go. You see, now does yours say the festival, it says the Passover of the Jews? You see, because this is the problem. The problem was at the time, before Yahushua died, these feasts was only for those that were Jews. It was for the Hebrews. It was not for the Gentiles, really. Because remember, Yahushua had not come and torn the veil, so that we now have the right to claim this for ourselves, because we were not grafted in yet. So that is why, at the time of when this is being written, these were feasts of the Yehudim. And so now when we read this, we've totally excluded ourselves out of it, because it says it's the feast of the Jews. But if you go to Romans 11, where it says you're grafted into that olive tree, then the feasts are not only, as they were at the feasts are for us too, because we are part of that covenant. This is the renewed covenant that was given to us by Yahushua, because this was not for us at this time. Let's look at Acts chapter 20 verse 6. Okay, and it says, and we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came to them at Troas in 5 days, where we stayed 7 days, because those were the 7 days of the unleavened bread. So do you see, yes, Paul, this is Paul, the one who they say, oh no, he came to do away with everything. So why is Paul then still keeping the feast? Yeah, Paul, this is Paul. And he's still keeping, at the time, they were in Philippi. And yet, being in Greece, he's still keeping the feast. After the days of unleavened bread had come to those, you see, and they stayed there 7 days. And Paul was still keeping the feast of unleavened bread. Let's go and look at Hebrews 11:28. Okay, so it talks of what Yahuwah does here for us. By belief he performed the Pesach and the sprinkling of the blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. So this is talking about, by faith. This is all by faith. So this is the faith chapter. By belief, he left Mitzrayim, not fearing the wrath of the sovereign, for he was steadfast at seeing him who is invisible. By belief, he performed the Pesach and the sprinkling of the blood, lest he who touched the firstborn should touch them. Let's go look at 1 Corinthians 5. Okay, 1 Corinthians 5, 7 to 8. This one is very clear. Once again, it's Paul, and he says, therefore. So, let's read from verse 6. He says, your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the entire lump? Therefore, cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Messiah, our Passover, is slaughtered for us. So then, let us celebrate. There he's telling you to celebrate. Let us celebrate the festival, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So, as Paul at any stage saying here that you're not to keep the feast, he's saying, let us keep the feast. So, the whole thing about the unleavened bread, what they do, what they do in Israel, when you come to the time of getting rid of the leaven, this is when you do introspection in your life. Once again, at the time of Passover, before Passover, they start to get rid of all the leaven in the house. Now, the leaven represents something that will be defiled. So they are wanting to get rid of it. So in Israel, you must see, at that time, it's hectic. You just see bags and bags of bread everywhere. Everybody's getting rid of all the leaven from their houses, and they got to wash down all the restaurants, and they got to wash down everything, their houses, and they cleanse everything of the leaven. Now the Father is trying to tell us, what Paul is trying to tell us here, is that, fair enough, you can keep the feast. Eat no unleavened bread. But let us rather look at the fact that we are to have no leaven in our hearts. Because that little bit of leaven that is there, that leaven is representative of the sin. And that sin that is there is going to contaminate the whole body. So let us get rid of the leaven of the sin. So that's why at the time of Pesach, when we do the unleavened bread, where we don't eat leaven for 7 days, and when we start to clean our houses of the leaven, we are trying to say to the Father, in this time of the 7 days, of the cleansing, of this getting rid of the leaven, I want you to get rid of the leaven that's in my heart. I want you to cleanse me. I want you to purify me. Whatever is not of you, get rid of it. Because this is exactly what Paul is saying here. So then let us not celebrate the festival, not with the old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Because it doesn't help you to sit and do these feasts as a fact of, I'm just going to keep it by the motions. We need to understand what is the significance behind doing the feast. The leaven was to get rid of the sin that was there. You understand? Okay. Now we're going to read about first fruits. Let's read Exodus chapter 23. Because these are the 3 feasts that we're covering now, the 3 spring feasts. The first 3 feasts on the menorah, which is your Pesach, your unleavened, and then your first fruits. So, let's look at Exodus chapter 23. Exodus chapter 23, verses 14 to 18. So that we understand that this is something that he once done. So we're just going to look again at the 3 feasts. So he says, from verses 14, he says, there 3 times in the year you are to celebrate the festival to me. So it's 3 times in the year that you are to celebrate the festival to me. You see, celebrate the festival to me. Who's these festivals for? For us, for him. See? Guard the festival of matzos. Okay, that's the festival of unleavened bread. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, and I command you at the time appointed in the new moon of Abib. Now that word Abib is in the springtime. It's in the springtime. For in it you came out of Mitzrayim, and do not appear before me empty-handed. And the festival of the harvest, the first fruits of your labors, you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering, at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labor from the field. 3 times in the year your males are to appear before the Master Yahuwah. Do not slaughter the blood of my slaughtering with leavened bread, and the fat of my festival shall not remain until morning. Okay. So we are going to look a little bit more in detail now into being able to understand the first fruits. Now, the Father once, at the time of when he spoke to Moses as he was giving them these things that they were to be able to do in the desert, he spoke to them that they were supposed to bring a first fruits offering. Because understand, this is your spring feast. So your very first harvest that you get of your barley harvest is what you're going to bring to the Father. Your barley, your wheat and your barley that you are going to bring. So we're going to read Leviticus chapter 23, verses 1 to 14. Now, there's something I want to point out to you. Did you see when we read Exodus chapter 12? Let me just cover this severe again, because I started on Pesach, but I didn't go. We saw in Exodus chapter 12, I'm just going to quickly go back, that says, this new moon is the beginning of new moons for you. It is the first new moon of the year for you. So do you see that at the time of Pesach, this is the beginning of years for you? I mean, some of the Bibles actually say it, that it's the beginning of years. I don't know what your Bible says. Just read to me Exodus chapter 12, verse 2.
This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you.
Okay, there you go. So do we establish clearly here that this month is the beginning of the first month of the year for you? It's very clear. So do we understand that when it comes to Pesach, that is the time of when we are going to enter into the new year? And from there, you have to start your year to be able to establish your feasts. Because remember, it says, at the new moon, so we need to look for the new moon of when we know now that the way the Father has revealed it to me, this is the way I got it this year. I just understood it this year. Many people go according to the barley being Aviv, but the Father showed me that it goes further, because we've got to look at the signs that He's placed in the heavens. Now, at exactly the time of when the equinox, now understand, we're coming into the spring feasts. They're called the spring feasts. This is the time of the spring feasts. It's the month of Abib. We just read the month of Abib. The month of Abib is the month of springtime. So, you have to first go according to the equinox of when the season turns into spring. So that we make sure that we are in the springtime and that we are not still in winter. Because how are you going to give a harvest? You need to bring first fruits. How are you going to bring a first fruit harvest if you don't even have anything ripe yet? You know what I'm saying? So, the first new moon after the equinox. So the equinox is remember, He put the sun, the moon, and the stars as signs for us. So we can't only just look at the moon. We have to look at the sun. The sun establishes the change of the seasons. That's what this, and it gives us the day. When sun sets, the day begins. So the sun gives us the day, and the sun gives us the seasons. So when the sun comes at the time of when now it starts in the equinox to come to the place of where it's springtime, that is the first new moon. After that, which is then when we see that new moon, 10 days from that new moon, it will be when you choose the Passover lamb. Then on the 14th day is when the Passover will begin. Okay?
So on the 14th day from your first new moon that you spot in the heavens, after the equinox, this is the way the Father explained it to me, because this is when you're using the sun, the moon, everything in the heavens that needs to be able to be His lining up season. The first new moon after that, then from there you count your 14th day. On that 14th day, by that evening, you will have your lamb. That will be the Passover, with your unleavened bread. And then for 7 days, you are to celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. Okay? That's unleavened bread. And that is now the beginning of the year for you. And boy, you must get this right. Because if you don't, the rest of your feast will be out. This is exactly what we've got now. This is exactly what's going on right now, this very year. Because at Pesach, there were people that started it a month before. They counted their things from the 14th of March. The new year was already on the 10th of March, and then they started doing their whole calendar from there, and that's why they are a whole month out from us. They already just had I think busy with tabernacles, already finished tabernacles. We're still going to have tabernacles. So do you see what I'm saying? If you don't get it right, the feast at Pesach, and you don't get this right, then the rest of your feasts are going to be out. Do you see the significance of getting it right? You've got to get it right. And the Father has put parameters there, because I said to the Father, it can't just go on the barley. Because now we're relying on a man that's going to look at barley in Israel. And you know what, if you go according to the barley, there's in the Sinai desert, the barley will already be ripe in February. So you can have barley ripe already then. But the problem is, it's not the season of springtime. Do you see what I'm saying? So you need to have the right season, because the Father does things according to His seasons. So you can't be having a Pesach that's going to be already offering offerings that's still in winter. He wants to have it done in His springtime. And this is where this word Abib has become the problem. But that word Abib in the Hebrew is actually springtime. Because when I went and looked at my Hebrew Bible, in my Torah scroll Bible of the Hebrew Bible, it says that word Abib says springtime. So which means it's springtime. Okay, let's go look at Leviticus chapter 23. Okay, Leviticus chapter 23 is if you really want to understand the feasts. This is a chapter that I would really go and study. Really make a point of studying Leviticus chapter 23, because Leviticus chapter 23 is really going to give you the full understanding of the feasts. And it's very clear cut. It's really not complicated. He's explaining it very nicely. He puts it all there for us to be able to read. So I'm going to read from verse 1, and you're going to see that all three of the feasts are laid out beautifully here. These three spring feasts. Okay. So Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, the appointed times of Yahuwah." Okay. Whose appointed times are they? The Father's appointed time. You've seen that. What does your Bible say?
The Lord's.
Okay. Which you are to proclaim as set apart gatherings. My appointed times are these. Did he say my appointed times? So once again we realize this is not about the Jews. This is about Him. This is His appointed times. Okay? 6 days work is done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest. Okay, we'll do a teaching just on the Sabbath. A set apart gathering, you do no work. It is a Sabbath to Yahuwah in all your dwellings. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah, set apart gatherings which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. In the first new moon, on the 14th day of the new moon, between the evening is the Pesach to Yahuwah. So there we see. Okay, so the first one, on the 14th day, after we spotted the new moon, 14 days after that, as you're coming into the evening, is the Pesach of the Father. Okay? On the 15th day, this new moon is in this new moon is the festival of Matzot, which is the festival of unleavened bread. To Yahuwah, 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread. So, that 14th day, so it says 15th day. So when does the day begin? the day begins the evening. So just before sunset, Yeshua would have died. He died 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay? He died. Then that evening, they ate that Passover lamb, and that lamb, straight after it was died, they crucified, they slaughtered the lamb. By that evening, when they eat the unleavened bread, they're eating the Pesach with unleavened bread. Unleavened bread starts that evening, which will be the 15th day. Remember, Father's Day starts at sunset. So, for us, it's still the 14th day. But the minute the sun sets, you start the new day. So it's already the 15th. Now, that evening, now look what it says. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. On the first day you have a set-apart gathering, you do no civil work. Which means that 15th day is a high holy Sabbath. Because, why? The first day and the last day of the feast, you do no civil work. That's what he's saying. On the first day, you have a set-apart gathering. You do no civil work. And you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah for 7 days. On the 7th day is a set-apart gathering. You do no civil work. So at Pesach, the first day, so from that evening of the 15th, now believe me, if you want to know how this works, you will know it perfectly when you are in the land of Israel. Because let me tell you, if you don't know these feasts, all of a sudden, you think, wow, why are all the shops closing? It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the shops are closing, what's wrong? I still wanted to go and buy something, now everything's closing. Why? Because that evening is going to be the evening of Pesach. And they're now closing already by 3 o'clock, everything is closed. Because that evening is already going to start the Pesach. Because their 15th day starts that night. So then that night, and the whole of the next day, is going to be the High Holy Sabbath. Then funny, the next evening, by the evening, when it comes about 8 o'clock, wow, everybody comes out again. Shops start to open, alive again. Because their day starts from sunset to sunset. So it's beautiful as we really understand it. When you are in the land, you see it beautifully. It's not complicated because they operate in it. Because this is the way the Father's calendar works. And there it works. So if you don't know these feasts and you go there as a tourist, you've got a problem. Because next thing you know, shops are closing and you don't know what the heck is going on. Because they keep it according to their calendar. And this is the way the Father's calendar works. The same as a Shabbat. By 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, everything starts to close. You get your last bus, you get your last train, you get your last thing. Your last shop is going to be closed. And then it's going to be closed right up until the following evening. And only then by about 8 o'clock, then the buses start to run, the train starts to run, and then that is their Sabbath. It's been a whole day set apart. So it's not complicated when you are there, because you see it in operation. But now you understand when I say to you that then that first day is a high holy Sabbath. So now you see when they talked about the fact that Yeshua died on a Sabbath, that day was a Sabbath. It would have been a Sabbath. What Sabbath was it? Not the Sabbath of a Friday. It was the Sabbath of the unleavened bread. Because remember, they had to take him off the stake, off the cross. Why? Because that was going to be the festival of unleavened bread. And he couldn't be up there. They wanted to put him in the tomb because now they're going to go and have their celebration of the Passover. And he's just fulfilled this Passover that they're going to have. He became their Passover lamb, fully. And now they're taking him off. And this is where the confusion comes in, where as the Gentiles do not understand it. Why? Because when they read their Sabbath, it must be a Friday, because their Sabbath are amazing. Pesach can be the Sabbath, but then the Sunday becomes the Sabbath. But Pesach can be the Friday that he was crucified. Because it says it was the Sabbath. But it wasn't the Sabbath of a Friday Sabbath. That's why my son once said to me, my eldest son, he said to me, I think he was, 11 years old or something, came to me. And he posed a question, and I didn't know how to answer. He said, Mom, I don't understand. Because, at the time he was reading scriptures, everything was in a Christian school. So, and he turned around and he said to me, Mom, I don't understand. If Jesus died on a Friday and resurrected on a Sunday, how is that 3 days and 3 nights? Because they talk about that he will be in the belly of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. How is that 3 days and 3 nights? I said, don't ask questions I don't know. Because we just keep it. You see, that's what we do. We blindly follow. We blindly follow. We like sheep that go astray. We follow the little shepherd, and this is what we've been doing for years, and this is how we've been going about our lives, and we just carry on, and Father saying, listen, yeah, it's time to wake up. Wake up! Because I have a pattern in the way I do things. I definitely did not die on a Friday and resurrect on a Sunday, because you will not get 3 days and 3 nights from there. I died on a Wednesday and resurrected on a Saturday evening as it was sun setting. And there's your 3 days and 3 nights, if you go do your calculation. So, our problem is our Bibles have been very much, with the translations, there's a lot of confusion. And this is where the problem comes in. First of all, it tells us it's the feast of the Jews. So it wasn't for us. So it's still not for us. It wasn't for them then. It wasn't for the Gentiles then. So it's not for us now. But that's a lie. Because it says it's the feast of the Father. If you're truly serving the Yahuwah of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, then this is his feasts. Okay. So let us go, so let's just continue to finish this with the first fruits. And it says, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah for 7 days. On the 7th day is a gathering, you do no civil work. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, you shall reap its harvest. Then you shall bring a sheaf of first fruits of your harvest to the priest. So you see, this is now they need to bring a sheaf of their first fruits that needs to be given to the priest. Now, do you understand why when I spoke about Cain, that was in the garden, that the father said that why didn't he bring, what offering did he bring? He brought any offering. But yeah, they were to bring the sheaf of the first fruits to the father. So the father's pattern doesn't change. If Abel brought the first of his offering, which was the animal that he brought, was the firstborn, then why did Cain not bring his first fruits of his land? You see what I'm saying? Here it is. Bring the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. So the last one is the first fruits. And now look how beautiful this is, because Yahuwah becomes our first fruits offering. When he resurrects on the 3rd day, as he goes up to the Father, he takes the blood that's why he said to Mary, don't touch me. I still need to ascend. I still need to go to my Father. He brought the blood to the Father and offered him the first fruits offering, that he became the first fruits offering for us. And that's the fulfillment of the first fruits. Yahuwah was the first fruits of the resurrection. He was the first one that he was resurrected, so that when we have to get our resurrected bodies, we become the first fruits for the Father, but he already became the first fruit offering. And that's the fulfillment of the 3 feasts. Okay. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 15:20. Corinthians 15, verse 20. But Messiah has been raised from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. See? He became our first fruit. So from those that had fallen asleep, he becomes the first fruit that he resurrects. So it says, By now, Messiah is raised from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. Okay. James 1:18. Okay, James 1:18 says, having purposed it, he brought us forth by the word of truth, for us to be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So do you see how he wants a first fruits offering that's going to come from us? And that's where I started in the restoration plan. Remember, when I started the restoration plan, I started with showing that there is a set apart people that need to be those first fruits for the Father. And now it's tying in, you see. Let's look at Revelation 14:4. So now we'll see these first fruits. So who are these? Who are the first fruits? They are those who were not defiled with woman, for they are maidens. They are those following the Lamb wherever he leads them on. They were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to Yahuwah and to the Lamb. That is part of the feast of first fruits. See, where he's going to once again have a first fruits offering that needs to be given to his Father, because this is the pattern that has been there from the beginning. He was a first fruits. Father will have a first fruits offering that will have to be redeemed from the earth. And that's why I'm saying this message isn't for everybody. It's not for everybody. It's for those who truly want to strive to be a first fruits. How can you be part of first fruits if you don't even know what it's about and you're not even keeping it? I don't know. Right, then after that, you go into the feast of Shavuot. So let's, Shavuot in the Hebrew word for Shavuot means weeks. It concludes the daily counting of the Omer, which is the barley offering at the temple. The count goes on for 7 weeks. So this is now, once you've had the Passover, okay, once you've had the feast of the Passover, once you've established this, from the time of your first fruits, you start to count your 7 weeks. So you start to count your 7 weeks, 50 days. Okay, there's your 50. So it will be the 50 days. So let's go look at it in Leviticus chapter 23. Okay, let's just first go to Exodus chapter 19. We're going through a lot of scripture, but this is to build a foundation, because you see, once you work through all of this, you get a better understanding. Okay, Exodus chapter 19. Okay, we can read from 3, and then we're reading to 22. All right, so let's just read from verse 3. And Moshe went up to Yahuwah. Oh, okay. So this is basically where the feast starts. So, right. Okay. This is now where we need to really establish a foundation of what Shavuot is about. Right. Before I even start this, I want to explain to you basically what has happened. Let me paint you a picture. Okay. Let's look at this. When the Father chose the Israelites and to deliver them out of Egypt, to be able to put the blood on the lintels of the doors, did they do anything for the fact that they were spared of that? Was it because they were good? Was it because of anything? Or was it because of the fact that the Father had a covenant with them and salvation was given to them freely? It was given to them. I mean, if we think about it, for 400 years, those Israelites had been living in Egypt. I don't think they were really keeping the ways of the Father, do you? No. But the Father had a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now remember, the Father is an Yahuwah of covenant. We looked at last week that the Father made a covenant with Abraham, Noah. Remember, Father made a covenant with Noah. And so that's the first time we see covenant being made. And that is when he still put the rainbow in the heavens and said, I make a covenant with you and your seed. Okay. So Father is a father of covenant. Because he had made a covenant with Abraham, because he had made a covenant with Isaac and Jacob, that became the 12 tribes, that then became the children of Israel. They were in bondage in Egypt. They were multiplying, and by this time they are a serious nation. But for more than 400 years, there had been nobody to hear their cry, and by this time they became slaves in Egypt. So when the Father sends them a deliverer, Moses is a type of Yahuwah that comes to deliver them. But once they get delivered, he brings them out of Egypt. But where do they go straight away? Do they go into their promised land? You see, this is what we seem to think. We get saved and then we're going into the promised land. Cool. It's cool. No. Let's get this right. You got saved and then you go into a wilderness. Your life becomes a wilderness experience because the Father is wanting to test you to see if you will truly obey Him. Because do you think He's just going to allow anybody to come and enter His kingdom? Salvation is a free gift, but you've got to walk out that salvation with fear and trembling. Is it not? Is that not what the Scripture says? That's what Scripture says. So, He brings them now into the wilderness. They all pass through the Red Sea. That's like the baptism. You know, we baptize with water. We get baptized with water. And then He puts them in this wilderness, and now they're going to be tested. And now I want to read to you a scripture. I've done it before in one of the other lessons, but I want to just do it now quickly. He tells you in Exodus chapter 15, because I need to build a precedence here. Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. See, because Father wants us to be able to look at the foundation that we are busy building here about Shavuot. Because Shavuot is one of the most powerful feasts to understand. Okay. He says, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahuwah, your Elohah, and you do what is right in His eyes, and shall listen to His commands, shall guard all His laws, I shall bring on you none of the diseases that are brought on the Mitzrites, for I am Yahuwah who heals you. So understand. Now He's telling them clearly, listen here. I'm not going to bring on you any of the diseases, but you need to do what? You need to obey me. Obey my commands, obey what I tell you. Right. So He's already telling them. For me not to bring any of the diseases that's going to come on you, you need to obey me. So let's not forget that the Father is a Father that wants obedience. Okay. Now we get to Exodus 19. Exodus 19, we're going to start reading, and we're going to see that in Exodus chapter 19, He's going to give a command to Moses here, and He's going to say to him, right, now He's brought all these people out of, they had their Passover lamb, they put the blood on the lentils, they've come out, these are now His people, and now He wants to teach them. Do you understand? Because this is a rebellious bunch. This bunch does not know the ways of the Father. Remember, they have not known, they've had no prophet, they've had no encounter, they've had no person, they've had nobody speak to them for 400 years. They've been in slavery for more than 400 years. Now the Father wants to teach them, because who taught Noah? Who taught Abraham? Who taught Isaac? Who taught Jacob? Was it not Him speaking to them? Was it not Him leading them by His Spirit? Yes, it was. How was Abraham knowing what to do? The Father would speak to him through His Spirit. How did Noah know how to build an ark? How did Noah know how to walk with the Father? Because it was by His Spirit. So now we look from... That's why it's important for us to understand what happened here. Because this is the covenant. This is where in the Hebrew language you talk about a ketubah. Okay, it's the marriage covenant. This one here. So let's start in Exodus 19 from verse 3. And Moshe went up to Elohah, and Yahuwah called to him from the mountain, saying, this is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and to declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So do you see? He's telling them clearly, I am the one that delivered you, and I brought you on eagle's wings to myself. And now, take note of the scripture and highlight it and underline it, because this is important. And now, if, that little if, you see that little if. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples of all the earth is mine. For all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. Do you see? This is a covenant that he's making with them. This is when, let me explain to you what happens in a Jewish wedding. Okay. Before a man and a woman actually get married, there is something called a betrothal. Now, the betrothal is when the groom goes to his bride-to-be and he gives her a ketubah. And that ketubah is known as like a covenant that he gives her to say, I want you to be able to enter into covenant with me, and will you adhere to these rules that I give you? These are my family, say it's your family rules that you have, and he gives it to his bride-to-be. And that is actually at the time of where a betrothal takes place, because she has the choice there whether she's going to accept that ketubah, that covenant, or not. That's her choice. He gives her the ketubah, and at that moment there's a betrothal. Now remember that when the betrothal takes place, this is already seen in the eyes of the father as a marriage. The only problem is you haven't consummated it. But there's already a marriage that's taken place, because from there, the groom leaves and he goes and prepares a place for his wife. Okay? But now she must want to keep this ketubah, this covenant that he's given her, with these certain rules that he's given her, that she will prepare herself so that when he comes for her, she will be adhering to this. So she has a choice to make. And I want you to understand that this is where the betrothal takes place between the father and his bride, that he wants to present to his son. He's going to say to her, listen, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a reign of priests and set apart nation. There, a first fruits people, a set apart people, a segula people. A segula is a peculiar people. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel. So at this very time, you see how the Father is giving them his covenant in saying, this is what I want you to do. And so now we continue to read, and now we see what goes on here. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, see, I'm coming. Okay, let's read from verse 7. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahuwah commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahuwah has spoken, we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, see, I am coming to you in the thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, go to the people and set them apart today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments and shall be prepared by the third day. Interesting. They were being set apart for 3 days. On the third day, Yeshua was resurrected from the dead. See, on the third day. For on the third day, Yahuwah shall come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of the people. You see, already there was the third day. See how the Father's always got everything hidden already in his scriptures. And you shall make a border for those people all around, saying, take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall certainly be put to death. Not a hand is to touch it, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live. When your bell sounds long, so the shofar, your bell is the shofar, when the shofar sounds long, let them come near the mountain. And Moshe came down from the mountain to the people and set the people apart, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, see, the washing. We can't just come before the Father in our filthy rags. We need to be washed, we need to be set apart, we need to be cleansed. And he said to the people, be prepared. By the third day, do not come near a wife. And it came to be on the third day in the morning that there was thunders and lightnings and thick clouds on the mountain, and the voice of a shofar was very strong. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet with Yahuwah, and they stood at the front of the mountain, and Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it because Yahuwah descended upon it in fire, and its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the mountain trembled exceedingly. And when the voice of the shofar sounded long and became very strong, Moshe spoke, and Yahuwah answered him by voice. And Yahuwah came down upon Mount Sinai, on top of the mountain, and Yahuwah called Moshe on top of the mountain, and Moshe went up. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, go down and warn the people, lest they break through unto Yahuwah to see, and many of them fall. And let the priests who come near Yahuwah set themselves apart, lest Yahuwah break out against them. And Moshe said to Yahuwah, the people are not able to come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, make a border around the mountain and set it apart. And Yahuwah said to him, come, go down, and then come up, and you and Aaron and you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahuwah, lest he break out against them. Right, so we start to see from Chapter 20, the Father starts to give the Ten Commandments. He starts to give them the commandments. But something happens. And now we're going to see here, at verse 18, look at what happens in verse 18. 20 verse 18. Exodus 20 verse 18. And all the people saw the thunders and the lightning flashes and the voice of the shofar and the mountain smoke, and the people saw it, and they trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moshe, you speak with us and we hear, but let not Yahuwah speak with us lest we die. And Moshe said to the people, do not fear, for Yahuwah has come to prove you, in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. Let's see. The Father at that moment wanted to be the one to give him the commands, to write it on the tablets of their hearts, so that they would have the fear of Yahuwah in them. His Spirit was going to be given to them, so that they would not sin. Do you see? It says, and Moshe spoke to the people, do not fear, for Yahuwah has come to prove you, in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. So the people stood at a distance, but Moshe drew near the thick darkness where Yahuwah was. And Moshe said to Moshe, and Yahuwah said to Moshe, say this to the children of Israel, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens. You do not make besides me mighty ones. So from this, the people started to fear. From here, the people started to fear. And they said, Moshe, you speak with us, we hear, but let not Yahuwah speak with us, lest we die. So they were the ones that at that point silenced Moshe. Well, silenced the Father and said, we're too scared. Moses, you listen to him, and we will then listen to you. You see? And this is where, from here, that then Moses stays, he listens, and they're no longer listening. Every time these people go into disobedience, And at this very moment, understand, Moses is saying to them, do not fear, for Yahuwah has come to prove you, in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. But at the end of the day, they are the ones that did not want to hear, because of the fear that came upon them. But the fear that was supposed to be there was a fear that came from what? A reverential fear. And let me tell you, this is the fulfillment. This is where the Israelites, Shavuot, which is the one that we're dealing with now, the feast that we're dealing with now is the Feast of Shavuot, which is the fourth feast. Now this fourth feast is so important. As you can see on the menorah, it is the feast that is the one that is going to feed the other feasts. Because this is the center feast. This is the only feast that stands alone. And number 4 is the number of the fourth candle of the menorah, is the number 4, which is the door, which symbolizes Yahuwah. Yahuwah became our door. By his death and his resurrection, on this feast of Shavuot, this is the feast of when the law was given on Mount Sinai. So on Mount Sinai, the Father gives this law. This is the covenant that he makes with them. This is the covenant. So when they celebrate the feast of Shavuot, they are celebrating what happened on Mount Sinai when they were given the commands of the Father, when they were given the covenant of the laws that was given. But those laws eventually, what happens? They get put on tablets of stone. Those commands get put on tablets of stone. That was never the Father's will, because the Father wanted to write it on their hearts, like he did with Moses, like he did with Abraham, like he did with Isaac, like he did with Jacob, like he did with Noah, like he did with all the others, like he was doing with Moses. Moses was being able to commune with him through his Spirit. So the same thing that he was doing with Moses was the same. He said, prepare them, clean them up, bring them. I want to be the one to talk to them. But what happens? They say no, they fear. Moses, you listen to him, Moses. And then by the time Moses comes down, what are they already doing? The very thing he just spoke in the first command, you shall have no other idols before me. When Moses comes down, because Moses stays up there 40 days. When Moses comes down, what happens? They're already building a golden calf. But if they'd stayed in that presence and allowed him to be able to give him this, he was going to give them his Spirit. There was never that he was going to want to write that law on tablets of stone. He wanted that very day, he wanted to write it on the tablets of their heart. He wanted them to be his set apart people. He wanted them to be able to be a company of priests that he was going to reveal himself through. But now, they were the ones that said, no, Moses, you speak to him. And so you see, this is now where the Father now brings us Yahuwah as the feast of Shavuot now needs to be fulfilled. So what happens after this? After he comes down from the mountain, they are busy sacrificing now. They have built a golden calf. Moses breaks those tablets and 3,000 fall straight, dead. They get killed. 3,000 of them died. Now, we're going to see the fulfillment of Shavuot. So let's first start with Leviticus chapter 23. So that we see then the fulfillment of this feast of Shavuot. Leviticus 23. We'll be in and out from Leviticus 23. Okay, let's read from 15 to 22. And it says, and from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count for yourselves 7 complete Sabbaths. So what he's saying, and from the morrow of the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, which was the sheaf of the first fruits, remember? the first fruits offering that was done. They said, bring your first fruits offering, a sheaf of your first fruits to the priests. We read that just before. Now he's saying, and from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, so whatever the Sabbath is, whatever the day of the Sabbath is, so the Sabbath of the Friday Sabbath, Friday evening Sabbath. From the day after that, you start to count 50 days. Until the morrow of the seventh Sabbath, you count 50 days. Then you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah. Okay? There you go. So from the day after the Sabbath, so it will be from the Saturday evening, you start to count 50 days, and then you will have your wave, you will then have this Feast of Shavuot being fulfilled on that day. So the Feast of Shavuot is always on a Saturday evening to a Sunday evening, because it will be the morrow after the Sabbath. So straight after the Sabbath ends, you start to count your 50 days. That is when you start to count. So and then you count 7 Sabbaths. That's where there's a lot of confusion, because the Jewish people keep it. The Jewish people keep it from the day of the first fruits is, I think it's the day after the 15th. They then bring the first fruits. So they start counting after the Sabbath of the first fruits. But you've got to count 7 Sabbaths. So how do you count 7 Sabbaths? By going to a Sabbath that was only one day Sabbath of the High Holy Sabbath. Do you understand? It's telling you count 7 Sabbaths. There's only one way that you can count 7 Sabbaths. It's your Friday to Saturday Sabbath. Do you understand? So those are the 7 Sabbaths. So you've got to go according to the Sabbath of a Friday evening Sabbath. And from there you count. Believe me, this was one that I worked through hectically to try and get this one right, because we are not on the same calendar as Shavuot as the Jews normally. This year, by the grace of Yahuwah, we were on the same calendar. Okay. Bring from your dwelling for a wave offering 2 loaves of bread of 10. Okay, I don't think we need to read that. 15. Oh yeah, we said 15 to 22. Okay. Bring from your dwellings for a wave offering 2 loaves of bread of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour. They are baked with leaven, first fruits to Yahuwah. And besides the bread, you shall bring 7 lambs, a year old, perfect ones, 1 young bull, 2 rams. They are all ascending offerings to Yahuwah, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, an offering made by fire for a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah. And you shall offer 1 male goat as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs, a year old, as a slaughter of peace offerings. And the priest shall wave them before the bread, besides the bread of the first fruits, as a wave offering before Yahuwah, besides the 2 lambs. They are set apart to Yahuwah for the priest. And on the same day you shall proclaim a set apart gathering for yourselves. You do no civil work on it, a law forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Okay, do you see? A law forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. This is the feast now of first fruits. Of Shavuot. Then we read 22, and it says, and when you reap the harvest of your land, do not completely reap the corners of your field. When you reap, do not gather any gleaning from your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. This is where you read about Ruth, when she goes and gathers the wheat in the field, that she went and she gleaned from those corners. This is exactly what it is, because they're bringing the first fruits. So that's why at this time they read the book of Ruth, because this is exactly when Ruth goes now and she gleans from the field. And then when Boaz, a type of Yeshua, goes and does what? Takes a Gentile, which was a Moabite, and brings her into the fold. And that's where we see where we ourselves have been taken, grafted in, because she said to Naomi, your people will be my people, and your Elohim will be my Elohim. And so she gets grafted in. That's where already for us we are seeing how there will be a type of Messiah, like a Boaz, that was going to bring a Ruth and bring her in even when she was not allowed to enter into this covenant. So you see how there's always foreshadows of this covenant that we see throughout the word. So this is now the first. This is now the where they bring their first fruits offering of the end of the season that they're going to do, because this is normally a feast that's done in summertime. This is in the month of Sivan. The month of Sivan is the month in the Hebrew calendar called Sivan, and this is the month which is normally around May, June, depending on when we started our feast, obviously, of when we spotted the new moon. So it's normally May, June, and this is already going into your summer feast. Okay. Right. Now we're going to look at it in the New Testament. Let's go look at Acts chapter 2, verses 1 to 4. It's beautiful when you work through the feasts and you can understand the fulfillment of it and how Yeshua came to fulfill it, and how when you keep it, you understand the origin of what it was and how Yeshua came to fulfill it. And how when we keep it understanding what was being done. Okay, so we're going to read now Acts 2, 1 to 4. So let's read. And when the day of the festival of Shavuot, so there you see, the festival of Shavuot. What does your Bible say?
Day of Pentecost.
You see, when did it change to Pentecost? Who changed it to Pentecost? So when you read their festival of Pentecost, you won't even know where the heck it comes from. So you don't understand what's being fulfilled here, because they changed our Bible to say Pentecost. Who the heck called it Pentecost? Do you see what I'm saying? So they were coming up for festivals. Let's establish. They're coming up for festivals. They were there for a festival. And it was the festival of Shavuot. So who the heck changed it to Pentecost? So that's why you won't know how to tie this back to Mount Sinai and what happened on Mount Sinai. You won't know how to tie it back. You see? You won't know how to tie it back to Leviticus chapter 23. You won't know how to tie it back because your Bible doesn't even say the correct name. And it's calling it Pentecost now. You see what I'm saying? It's just changed the name altogether. Okay. And when the day of the festival of Shavuot had come, they were all with one mind in one place. Right, so they came up for the feast. Now we already established Yeshua was at every single feast of Pesach. We read that, remember, from a child. His parents were taking him up to Jerusalem, to the temple, to celebrate the feast of Pesach. This is what the Jews did. We read that 3 times a year they were to go up for the feast. They were to go up for the spring feast. This is now the summer feast. This is now the one of Shavuot. Okay. So when the day of the festival of Shavuot had come, they were all with one mind in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and settled on each one of them. And they were all filled with the set-apart Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them to speak. Okay. So this was the feast of Shavuot. And at this very feast of Shavuot, what is happening? This is when they would have come up on Mount Sinai. And imagine what was there. We heard the fire. We read about the fire and about the trumpet sound. We heard about the thundering. And now they're coming on them with tongues of fire. Do you see? Because that was what the Father wanted to give them on Mount Sinai to start off with. He wanted to give them His Spirit by fire on that day. But they retracted, started coming down the mountain. Moses stayed up the mountain. They came down. They went and built their golden calf. Now it gets written on tablets of stone. Moses comes down the mountain, breaks those tablets. And 3,000 of them die. Okay? Let's go read now Acts 2, verse 41. What happens there now? And those indeed who gladly received His word were immersed, and on one day about 3,000 beings were added to them. Wow, first fruits of those who died. Do you see how the Father's so faithful? Do you see? 3,000 died on that day. When he was going to want to give them, when Moses came down, bringing them the tablets, 3,000 of them died. On the day that the tongues of fire come upon them, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, comes upon them, 3,000 are gathered to them in one day. That's his harvest. That's his first fruit harvest that he summer reaps there and then for the ones that died on that day. That's the Father. See, the Father's faithful. He knows exactly what he's doing. So, now let's look at Acts. Let's go look at Exodus 32. So now, do you understand what has happened here? This feast of Shavuot, this was the fulfillment of that which was done on Mount Sinai. They are celebrating a feast of Shavuot, which is the celebrating of them receiving the Torah. Now, what was the purpose of the Torah being given us? What was the purpose? We're going to look at that now of the Spirit being given us. We're going to look at it now. We already looked at it last week, but we're just going to make sure that we just set the foundation here with that, so that we put it in, in set in stone. So let's look at Exodus 32, 28. Okay, let me just go to Exodus. Exodus 32. All right, let's just read from 1 to 8, and then we will read 28. So let's just read from 1 to 8, Exodus 32 from 1 to 8. And when the people saw that Moshe was so long in coming down the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, "Arise, make us mighty ones who go before us. For this Moshe, the man who brought us up out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron said to them, "Take off the golden earrings which are in your ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me." And all the people took off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand, and he formed it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. And they said, "This is your mighty one, O Israel, and brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim." Imagine, this is your mighty one that brought you out of the land of Israel. Imagine this little calf is the one that brought them out. Hello, how quick they are to forget. Let us not even look at them, because we know better. No, really, I have to say that because I'm no better. Really, I'm no better. I tend to forget all the time. And Aaron saw and built a slaughter place before it. And Aaron called out and said, "Tomorrow is a festival to Yahuwah." Do you see? Today we do the golden calf. Tomorrow we'll go worship Yahuwah. Well, what confusion. My goodness. Sounds like the church today. And they rose early on the next day and offered ascending offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, "Go down, for your people whom you have brought out of the land of Mitzrayim have corrupted themselves. And they have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molten calf and have brought themselves to it and slaughtered it and said, 'This is your mighty one, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim.'" Whoa! So now let's go look at verse 28. And verse 28 says, "And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day." Okay. You see? About 3,000 men of the people fell on that day. So now we just saw in the book of Acts that when Pentecost, what they call Pentecost, which is actually not even the name Pentecost, because that name doesn't even exist in the Bible. It was the feast of Shavuot that they were up and they were celebrating. Now remember, Yahuwah had been with them. He had resurrected on the third day. He stayed with them 40 days. Do you remember? 40 days he stayed with them. On the 40th day, he went up to the Mount of Olives and he ascended into heaven. And he said to them, "The way I go up is the way I come down." So he ascended on the Mount of Olives. He will come back again on the Mount of Olives. That's why he puts his feet on the Mount of Olives when he comes back, because that's where he ascended. Then he says to them, "Tarry until the Spirit come upon you. You are to tarry until the Spirit come upon you. So, let me see, where is that? Is it in Acts? I think it's in Acts chapter 2 as well. But anyway, this is what he tells them to tarry. So then they tarry for another 10 days. They tarry for another 10 days. And on the 50th day, interesting, on the 50th day, that is then when the Spirit came upon them, which would have been 40 days. Yahuwah resurrected on the 40th day. Another 10 days after that. I mean, how the Father always deals with me with numbers. So it was the 40 days, tested and tried. 40 days, okay. Yahuwah is ascended. 10 days more, they are to tarry. Interesting, 120 of them in an upper room gathered together. And then on the 50th day, the Holy Spirit has come upon them with tongues of fire, the Ruach HaKodesh. And what was the purpose for that? So that now, that which was given to them on Mount Sinai, which is with the Torah that was given to, which was the commands, the covenant. We talked about he's going to give them his covenant. How the ketubah, the marriage covenant, that is the ketubah between him and his people, that they didn't keep, that was broken. Now he wants to restore it again. He wants to bring the restoration of it. And this is exactly what we're going to see now. So, this is then when now the Holy Spirit now comes, the Ruach HaKodesh comes upon them. And what is the purpose for him having come? Because you see, this is what the people do not understand. People seem to think that the Holy Spirit was given us because they talk about Pentecost. So, oh no, we just received the Holy Spirit. But Pentecost is actually Shavuot. And Shavuot is a fulfillment of a feast. What is that feast? It was the feast of the covenant that was given. For what? Let's go look at it now in Ezekiel. Let's go look at it in Ezekiel, the prophetic of what Ezekiel already prophesied was going to come. Ezekiel chapter 36. We covered it last week, but let's just read it again because now we will know where it fits in. Because it fits in with us.
So Ezekiel 36.
Yes, Ezekiel 36. Let's read from 24. Okay, and I shall take you from among the nations, and I shall gather you out of all the lands, and shall bring you into your own land. And I shall sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness, and from all your idols I cleanse you. And I shall give you a new heart, and put a new spirit within you. And I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh. So that heart of stone was the tablets, the law that was written on the tablets of stone. So he wants to take out of us a heart of stone and give us a heart of flesh. And put my spirit within you. There you go. And I put my spirit, my Ruach, my Holy Spirit, my Ruach HaKodesh. I will put my spirit within you, and I shall cause you to walk in my laws, and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I shall be your Yahuwah. There you go. How difficult is that? Do you understand? This is what happened in the upper room. Now I tell you something. The reason why I am so passionate about this is because for 2,000 years we have lost this. We've lost this. We really have lost it. Because the Spirit was given us 2,000 years ago. But did it really come and fulfill Shavuot? So that this Torah would be written upon our hearts, so that the commands would be written upon our hearts, so that we would be walking as a set apart people to the Father to be able to be priests set apart for Him. No. We've lost something. Something has been lost along the way. Now, 2,000 years later, we are at an end of a dispensation. When we come to Yom Kippur now, We are an end of a dispensation. And the dispensation that we're coming into is the end of the 120th Jubilee. Now understand, we've been reading about on the 50th day, from the time that Yeshua was resurrected, on the 50th day, that was the time when the Holy Spirit came upon him, on the 50th day. We are coming into the 50th day now at Yom Kippur. And there was 120 of them gathered in an upper room. 120 means end of the dispensation of the flesh and the beginning of the dispensation of the Spirit. So they were going to stop having to try and keep that Torah in their flesh, where they were trying to keep His commands. They were trying to do all these things in their flesh, but they weren't able to do it. Now they've been given the Spirit. And the Spirit is telling you clearly here in Ezekiel chapter 36 that it's to write these things on your heart. Because Moses said to them, do not fear. Listen to what he says. Because the fear of Yahuwah is to be able to make sure that you don't sin. But there's no fear of Yahuwah in the land right now. There's no fear of Yahuwah, not even in the church right now. Do you understand what I'm saying? And this is where we have a problem. So when we start to understand His precepts, His ordinances, His commands, when we start to read the foundations of this book, then we start to understand what's pleasing to Him. And then we start to be able to have a fear of Him and walk the way He wants us to walk. That's as clear as that. It's as clear as that. And this is exactly what He wanted to do on this day. This is what He did with His disciples. When those disciples came out of there, they came out in power and might and authority. But where is that today? I say to the Father, where is that today? We've lost something, Abba. Something is lost. Help us to get it back, because we've lost something. That's when the Father showed me, and He said to me, well, you're trying to drive the car without doing the learner's license, because the learner's is my ordinances, my precepts, my commands that you need to adhere to, but you want to drive the car, but you don't want to do the manual of learning the learners. The learners is the commands and everything that you need to learn, that you need to adhere to, that you need to keep. And then I will give you my Spirit. And then you drive that car in all the fullness and authority, because you have authority to be driving it on the road. But you cannot drive a car on the road without having first done your learner's license. I mean, even in school. We go through secondary school. We go through primary school. That's our foundation to help us to go to high school. If we don't do primary school, how the heck are we going to get to high school? Do you understand? So the whole time the Father always gives us a foundation. So how do we just tuck out the whole of the Old Testament and say, we don't need it? It's not important. Hello? Everything in it is important for us to understand our Messiah, for us to understand our Father. If we don't have it, we don't understand our Messiah nor our Father. We don't know Him. Because that's what we covered last week. So let's finish off this session. Acts chapter 20. So just to make sure that we see that even Paul was with the feasts. Now let's see. For Saul, verse 16, verse 16. Okay. So let's just read, and it says verse 16. For Saul, Paul, has decided to sail past Ephesus, so that he might lose no time in Asia, for he was hurrying to be at Jerusalem, if possible, on the day of the festival of Shavuot. Hello. So as we see here in Acts chapter 15, Acts chapter 20 verse 16, we see that Shaul, which is Paul, has decided to sail past Ephesus so that he might lose no time in Asia, for he was hurrying to be in Jerusalem, if possible, on the day of the festival of Shavuot. Now understand, this is way after Yeshua. I mean, remember, Yahuwah has already resurrected. He's no longer there. So if he came to do away with all of that, then why is Paul making sure that he's still in Jerusalem to be able to go out for the festival of Shavuot? And it's not called Pentecost. What does yours say, by the way? You see? Pentecost. Tell me, what feast did you read in Leviticus that talks about Pentecost? Did you read any feast that talked about Pentecost? So why would he be going to a festival of Pentecost? Do you see the lie that we've been taught? He's going for the festival of Shavuot. Now let's go to 1 Corinthians 15. Sorry, 1 Corinthians 16. Okay, this is again Paul. 1 Corinthians 16 verse 8 says, "And I shall remain in Ephesus until the festival of Shavuot." There you see. Paul was keeping the festival of Shavuot. Now why would he keep it if the feast has already been done away with? Because it says clearly in Leviticus that this festival will be a festival forever. It's my festivals. I've put them in place. They will be there forever. You are to keep them. Finished. You know, the Father spoke that. And what was the purpose of this festival? So let us just finish with the scripture to be able to sum up this whole thing of this festival of Shavuot. And this we get in Hebrews 10, because everything about the festival of Shavuot was the fact that we were to receive our ketubah, our marriage covenant that was made on Mount Sinai, when we were given the covenant that we would adhere to and obey the ways of the Father, His commands, His ordinances, His precepts. And 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 16 says, "This is the covenant that I shall make with them after those days, says Yahuwah, giving my laws into their hearts, and in their minds I shall write them, and their sins and their lawlessness I shall remember no more." So do you see? The festival of Shavuot was all about the fulfillment of us receiving the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. For what purpose? To write the Torah on our hearts, to write those laws, those instructions, those commands, that which Moses was getting on Mount Sinai, writing it on tablets of stone. It gets broken, but listen, like I said last week, the first lot got broken, he goes back up again, another 40 days, isn't it? Comes back down again. And where do those get put? In the ark. Because the Father wants to come dwell in the ark of our hearts. When we receive Him, where does He come and dwell? He comes and dwells within us. And now when He dwells within us, He writes that law on our hearts. But how the heck is we going to know what the law is if we're not even reading it? Do you understand? So do you understand how we need to read it? Okay. So we will finish off here. And then we will start the next session where we're going to be looking at the last three feasts, which is the ones that is the prophetic feasts of what is to come. And then we can understand clearly what we are actually being prepared for.